Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're taking a really close look at something uh, truly vital and, I think, inspiring.
hmm
Is the powerful role young people are playing in shaping a more environmentally sustainable world.
Yeah, absolutely. And for this deep dive, we've gathered, well, a really compelling set of sources.
Yeah.
We're looking at articles that show these tangible, youth-led restoration projects, boots on the ground stuff.
Right.
Then there's research analyzing how and why young people get involved in sustainability.
Okay.
We'll explore the evolution of the youth climate movement, how it's changing,
hmm
plus insights into how the environment profoundly impacts young people's lives, and finally, the really innovative work of youth-led social enterprises.
Okay, so quite a range there. Our mission today, then, is to go beyond just saying, oh, young people care.
hmm
We want to really understand the concrete ways they're driving a sustainable future.
Exactly. What are they actually doing?
And what roadblocks are they hitting?
Yeah.
What challenges do they face?
Yeah, and importantly, what strategies are actually working? What's helping them succeed?
Right. So where should we start? Maybe with some concrete examples.
Let's do that. Let's ground this with some, well, really powerful examples of young people taking direct action. Our first source looks at the Global Landscapes Forum and the Youth in Landscapes Initiative's Restoration Stewards program. This was running 2020 to 2021.
Okay, restoration stewards. And this program, it was all about empowering youth in those communities really vulnerable to climate change, right? Getting them to lead restoration on their own landscapes.
Precisely. And the article dives into 5 specific projects, and some of the outcomes are genuinely impressive.
Let's hear about them.
Okay, first up, Charity Lanoy in Kenya. She's the livelihoods coordinator at the Maasai Wilderness Conservation Trust. Her big goal was, well, to change how the Maasai community thought about restoring their dry lands, valuing it more.
And how does she approach that? Sounds challenging.
In a really practical way, she helped local Maasai women create and manage a grass seed bank.
A grass seed bank, okay.
Yeah, and here's where it gets really interesting. Like you said, beyond just the environment.
Yeah.
This didn't just help with raising livestock better.
Right.
It actually created a whole new income stream for them, selling hay, selling glass seeds.
Wow.
And there's this anecdote, about one woman who, because of this income, could finally afford to send her daughter to school.
That's incredible, especially when the source mentioned her husband had refused.
Yeah.
It shows that wider social impact.
It really does. It's that perfect example of how interconnected these things are. And, this was all happening despite the challenges of the pandemic. Charity also got a beekeeping project and a tree nursery going.
Amazing resilience.
Yeah.
Okay, who's next?
Next, we head to Argentina. Annalie Bustos. She's a PhD researcher, and she's working on restoring the El Espinal forest ecosystem.
El Espinal. I think I read that's one of the world's most degraded ecosystems.
Sadly, yes, it is. So her project, the Monte Alegre Nature Reserve Project, really focused on building ecological appreciation and a sense of care within the local community itself.
So community buy-in was key.
Absolutely. And one of Manali's big takeaways, her key learning, was just how vital it is to share ownership and delegate tasks effectively within the team. You can't do it all yourself.
Makes sense. Did that approach work?
It really seemed to. They saw an increase in volunteers, much better outreach, stronger local networks and alliances. They built a native plant nursery, ran environmental education for schools, even did biodiversity censuses.
That's quite a list of tangible outcomes.
It is, and her future goal now is just to keep expanding the restored areas and get the community even more deeply involved.
Okay, fantastic. Where to next? Indonesia.
Yes, 2 examples from Indonesia. First, Grace Steria. She's an environmental consultant, and she launched a project called Carbon Ethics. This was for marine conservation in the Thousand Islands area.
Marine conservation, so coral reefs perhaps.
Exactly, focusing on restoring coral reefs that have been really badly damaged by human activity.
And what was her strategy there?
What's really interesting is her 2-pronged approach. She combined climate education specifically for local youth, using the carbon ethics curriculum, with a conservation model that was really, truly community-based, empowering the local people to be guardians of their own marine environment.
That sounds like a sustainable model. Did it get results?
It did. They successfully trained local volunteers in how to plant and monitor corals.
Wow.
And importantly, they started dialogues about developing ecotourism in a way that actually supports the reefs rather than harming them.
That's crucial. What are her plans now?
She's looking to upscale the project and also really focus on developing local leaders who can advocate effectively for these coral ecosystems, particularly through fundraising.
Building that local capacity.
Yeah.
Okay, and the second Indonesian example.
This one takes us to the Philippines. Or sorry, I misspoke. The fourth example is the Philippines, then another from Indonesia.
Ah, okay. Philippines first, then.
Right. Camille Rivera. She's working in La Union, specifically in abandoned fish ponds. Her focus is mangrove restoration.
Mangroves, incredibly important ecosystems, especially for storm protection.
Exactly. And for Camille, the Restoration Stewards program was the catalyst, It really helped kickstart her NGO's goals for mangrove restoration.
So the program funding and support made a direct difference. What did they manage to do?
They achieved some really concrete things. Training community members, building a mangrove seedling nursery, and they planted 1,000 seedlings specifically aimed at protecting the community from storms.
That's tangible impact.
And there's a really moving anecdote in the source here, too. A community member actually asked Camille if she could share her mangrove knowledge with other villages nearby.
Wow, so that desire for empowerment, for sharing that knowledge was really strong.
It really underscores that, yeah. It's not just about the planting, it's about the knowledge transfer.
Okay, now the final example from this program, but the second one from Indonesia.
Yes, exactly. Samarni Lamon, she's working in central Kalimantan, restoring forests degraded by, well, deforestation for development, but also by devastating fires.
It's a huge challenge. What's her project?
It's called the Heartland Project. It centers on reforestation, using native trees specifically chosen because they're resistant to the local weather patterns, and also doing community education alongside that.
And did she face obstacles?
Big ones, including pandemic lockdowns and even major floods.
Yet she still achieved things.
Quite a lot, actually, planting 8,000 trees.
8,000?
Yeah. And providing support to over 3,500 community members. She specifically mentioned how valuable the mentorship from the Restoration Stewards program was.
How so?
Getting expertise, particularly on peatland ecosystems, which are quite complex, and also on effectively engaging with indigenous communities. That support was crucial.
That mentorship aspect sounds key. What's her focus going forward?
Ambitious goals. Protecting forest areas that are now under threat from coal mining.
Oh, wow.
And establishing an ecology center focused on endangered species.
So these 5 projects, they really paint a picture of diverse, tangible, youth-led action on the ground.
Absolutely. It's incredibly inspiring stuff.
Okay, so those are fantastic, specific examples. But let's zoom out a bit. Why is this youth involvement considered so crucial more broadly? Our next source, an article from the Adamania Journal, seems to tackle this.
It does. It starts by defining environmental sustainability, pretty standard definition, responsible use and preservation of resources for now and the future.
Right.
But then it dives into the factors that shape environmentally significant behavior in young people, things like information access, incentives, pro-environmental consumer choices.
And the influence of parents and peers, presumably.
Right. That's highlighted too. And the article really stresses this growing global recognition that young people are critical for achieving the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs.
So what are the key takeaways from this broader look?
Well, a few things really jump out. First, it really hammers home that if we want to genuinely engage young people, we have to understand and cater to their unique perspectives, their motivations, their interests. It's not one size fits all.
Makes sense.
It also highlights how important fostering empathy and critical thinking skills are for driving a pro-environmental behavior.
Right, not just facts, but values and skills.
Precisely. And it pinpoints adolescence as this really crucial window for interventions aimed at shaping lifelong environmental values.
That's interesting. And it positions youth not just as stakeholders, but as a real driving force, right?
Right.
Bringing fresh ideas.
Yes, exactly that. A driving force bringing fresh perspectives and innovation. The article gives a good examples too, like UNICEF India supporting community conservation and recognizing youth leadership. Or that climate charter of demands presented by young climate champions in India back in 2020. A clear call for a clean and green environment.
And the role of education and online platforms must be pretty central here too.
Absolutely fundamental. For raising awareness, for building environmental literacy. The article points out key contributions youth make. Their passion, their determination.
That energy they bring.
Yeah, that energy, those fresh perspective, creative solutions, and their ability to act as catalysts, getting the wider public engaged.
But it's not all smooth sailing. The article mentions challenges too, right?
Oh, definitely. It doesn't gloss over the difficulties. Big ones include gaps in environmental awareness and education itself.
Okay.
Limited financial resources and access to funding, that's a huge one.
Always a barrier.
Lack of representation, not being included in decision-making processes where it matters.
Feeling shut out.
Yeah, and sometimes just a lack of support and mentorship, plus, political and policy barriers that limit how much they can actually participate.
So, quite a list of hurdles. Does the article suggest ways to overcome them? Strategies for better engagement?
It does. Several key strategies. Things like, well, creating actual platforms where they can participate meaningfully,
Right.
offering targeted training and capacity building, actively promoting collaboration and networking among young activists so they're not isolated,
Building those connections.
formally recognizing and celebrating their contributions that validation matters,
Left note.
strengthening environmental education, of course, and creating opportunities for green entrepreneurship.
Linking it to livelihoods.
Yeah, and general awareness campaigns, too. It also points to some successful initiatives mentioned in other reports.
Like what?
Case studies from an environmental justice program and the Youth Solutions report that one featured really cool projects like using sheep wool for insulation in Lebanon
Wow.
and growing mushrooms from coffee waste in Tanzania. Really innovative stuff.
Very practical solutions.
Yeah.
Any examples from India mentioned?
Yes, several. That Youth for Water campaign in Odisha, for instance. And some really inventive, sustainable practices, making furniture from rice husks, packaging from banana leaves, using natural dyes.
Amazing ingenuity. Does the article have recommendations for government specifically?
It does. Pretty concrete ones. Integrate environmental education properly into school curricula. Establish youth advisory councils so they have a formal voice. Provide dedicated funding and resources for youth-led groups. Support these organizations. Promote collaboration. Foster that green entrepreneurship. And run those awareness campaigns.
So a really comprehensive look at the potential, the challenges, and the pathways forward.
Exactly. It sets the stage nicely.
Okay, so building on that, our next source looks at a really interesting connection. The synergy between environmental education and what's called positive youth development. This is from research analyzed at Stanford.
Right. This analysis reviewed, I think it was 60 different articles, quite a lot,
Yeah.
all looking at environmental education, or EE, programs and how they impact positive youth development, PYD.
And PYD, that's framed around the 5 C's, isn't it?
That's the framework they use, yes.
Hmm.
Competence, confidence, connection, caring, and character.
Okay. And the big finding was?
A clear link. Well-designed EE programs really can contribute significantly to those PYD goals, helping young people become more competent on environmental issues, building their confidence, strengthening their connections to community, to nature, fostering that sense of caring for the environment, and developing character through taking responsible action.
So it's not just about learning facts about the environment.
Not at all. It's much more holistic. And the analysis identified 7 key strategies within EA programs that seem particularly good at fostering these PYD outcomes.
Okay, let's break those down. What's the first one?
First is meaningful relevance and place-based approaches. Basically, making the learning connect directly to the students' own lives and their local environment.
Makes sense. Got any examples?
Yeah, the source gives a few, like elementary students in Athens creating a book and even a performance for their local government.
Wow.
Or high schoolers in Costa Rica learning ecology through the lens of local ecotourism. Or U.S. students actually going to Bangladesh and seeing climate change impacts firsthand, really connecting it.
Like surreal. Okay, strategy number 2.
Youth-centered or youth-led activities, putting young people in the driver's seat.
How does that look in practice?
Like the Mindshift program in Nova Scotia, it uses peer-to-peer learning to drive sustainability actions. Or the EcoSchool program in the Czech Republic, where students tackle real environmental problems in their school or community, building action competence.
Giving them agency. Got it. Third strategy.
Opportunities for teamwork and collaboration, recognizing that working together is powerful.
So group projects.
Essentially, yes, but well-structured ones, like the 4-H Wildlife Habitat Evaluation Program, or collaborative field studies in environmental science, like one mentioned in Singapore, even building urban forest shelters together, like in a London program.
Learning by doing together. Okay, number 4.
Emphasis on action strategies, giving youth the chance to actively do something about the issues.
Beyond just learning about them.
Exactly. Like those students in Colorado making a film about climate change. Or students in Portugal using Instagram and posters to raise awareness about water pollution. Even a school's green committee tackling issues within the school itself. Or school gardens, especially engaging Indigenous youth in Arizona.
Tangible actions. Makes sense. Fifth strategy.
Using natural outdoor settings,
Yeah.
the power of learning in nature.
Getting outside the classroom.
Right. Programs like Green Spaces, Learning Places in London, or residential e-programs located in natural areas like the Golden Gate National Recreation Area in the U.S. That hands-on experience is invaluable.
I can see that. And number 6.
This one's about explicit, direct instruction in complex skills. So not just letting them figure everything out, but actually teaching things like critical thinking, problem solving, decision making,
Okay.
especially when dealing with complex socio-scientific issues. There's an example of a program for Mayan women in Guatemala teaching agroecology alongside essential life skills. It's that integrated approach.
Right. Building those transferable skills. And a final one, number 7.
Interdisciplinary programs, weaving environmental themes across different subjects.
So not just in science class.
Exactly. Using storytelling and drama in Greece to explore environmental issues, or combining school gardens with traditional food preparation for Native American youth, connecting culture, health, and environment.
It's really striking how these strategies show EE is about so much more than just environmental knowledge. It's about developing the whole person.
Absolutely. It's nurturing competence, confidence, connection, all those C's we talked about.
Okay, now let's shift gears a bit. Our next source looks at the youth climate movement itself and how it's evolving. This is from research by Climate Vanguard and the Green Economy Coalition, dated March 2023.
Yeah, this research has a really significant finding right off the bat. It suggests that perceived government inaction on climate change is actually, well, radicalizing young activists.
Radicalizing them. How so?
In their analysis, in their demands, and even in their tactics. Interestingly, the research also points out that sub-Saharan Africa is identified as the most active continent for climate protest.
That's interesting because media portrayals often focus elsewhere.
Exactly. It challenges that common narrative. And we're seeing tactics shift, too. It's not just school strikes and marches anymore.
Right, we're seeing more direct action.
Yes, like Greta Thunberg being arrested at a coal mine blockade. That's a prominent example they mention. And the underlying strategy, the vision, is evolving, too.
How is the vision changing?
There's a noticeable move away from the simple listen to the science message
Okay.
towards a more critical analysis, often rooted in post-colonial and anti-capitalist perspectives. This leads to calls for really fundamental structural transformation of our economic and political systems.
That's a major shift.
It is. The report found that over half of the youth climate movement groups they surveyed identified the current system, specifically capitalism and colonialism, as the root cause of climate breakdown.
Wow, over half. That's a strong statement about systemic issues.
And a significant number of those groups actually want to see the current economic system completely replaced. It shows a deepening understanding, or at least a belief, that the problem is systemic.
But does the movement have a unified plan for what comes next?
Well, that's where the report notes a challenge. While there's this growing radical analysis, it suggests the movement as a whole maybe lacks a single shared, coherent theory of change.
Meaning different groups have different ideas about how to achieve change or even what change looks like.
Kind of, yeah. Partly, they suggest, due to maybe a limited understanding of the sheer complexity of political economic systems among some activists. So there's energy and critique, but maybe not always a fully fleshed out alternative vision that everyone agrees on.
Okay, that makes sense. It's complex stuff.
But the research did identify what they call an emerging and influential radical green economic wing within the movement. These are groups developing perhaps a stronger strategic grasp and are escalating both their demands and their tactics.
So a more strategically focused part of the movement is growing.
That's the suggestion. And underpinning a lot of this is a palpable sense among many young people of feeling, well, marginalized by governments, ignored, and even betrayed by the economic choices made by older generations that have led us here.
You hear that frustration quite often. How does the report conclude?
With a really strong call for more funding and support for the youth climate movement, the argument is that with proper resources, the movement could significantly strengthen its impact and engage more strategically to drive the changes they're demanding.
Right, so resources are key to translating that energy into effective action.
Right.
It's clear the movement is dynamic and evolving rapidly.
Definitely not static.
Okay, so we've talked about youth action. Now let's flip the coin and look at how the environment impacts young people. Our next source is an article from Volunteers Initiative Nepal.
Yeah, this article really lays out how the massive changes humans have made to the environment are hitting the younger generation hard. Across the board, physical health, mental well-being, social dynamics, even future opportunities.
Let's start with physical health. What are the key impacts mentioned?
Pretty serious ones. Air
Yeah.
pollution leading to more respiratory diseases,
Mm.
asthma, bronchitis, things like that.
Yeah.
Water contamination causing waterborne diseases like cholera and dysentery, especially in vulnerable areas.
Right.
And then there's climate change itself, driving more extreme weather events, heat waves, floods, landslides, hurricanes. The article emphasizes that youth are disproportionately affected by these disasters.
And food security.
That too.
Hmm.
Poor nutrition due to food scarcity, which can result from droughts or other climate-driven shifts in agriculture. It's all interconnected.
And what about the mental and emotional side? We hear a lot about eco-anxiety.
Yes, the article specifically discusses the rise of eco-anxiety, this sort of chronic fear of environmental doom, feelings of being overwhelmed, helpless.
That sounds incredibly difficult to live with.
It is. And even for activists who are deeply involved, there's the risk of burnout and despair, especially when progress feels slow.
So what helps? How can that be addressed?
The article stresses how important it is to provide platforms for young people to actively participate in solutions. Education, awareness, open dialogue. These can help foster a sense of agency and optimism, countering the despair.
Being part of the solution, not just observing the problem, makes sense. What about social and economic impacts?
Those are significant too. Climate-induced displacement, for example, which disrupts education, breaks up communities, impacts social stability.
Yeah.
And it often hits marginalized communities hardest, creating or worsening cycles of poverty and vulnerability. This links back to the need for inclusive policies and genuinely sustainable development. Creating a fairer society matters for resilience.
But the article doesn't just paint a bleak picture, does it? It talks about youth as agents of change, too.
Oh, absolutely. It reinforces that point strongly, citing figures like Greta Thunberg, movements like Fridays for Future, but it also pushes for expanding youth activism beyond protests
Into what areas?
into practical contributions, getting involved in renewable energy projects, sustainable agriculture, waste management solutions, that kind of thing.
Hands-on solutions.
Yeah. And it calls on governments, NGOs, the private sector to actively create green jobs and entrepreneurship opportunities for youth, tying environmental action to economic opportunity.
So, building a resilient future requires
A multifaceted approach, according to the article. Policy changes from governments reducing emissions, protecting habitats, investing in renewables, a big focus on environmental literacy and education,
Okay.
community engagement, and individual responsibility too, things like reducing waste, conserving energy, supporting local initiatives, and importantly, collaboration between generations.
So it's clear young people are both deeply affected by environmental issues and crucial players in addressing them. Their well-being and the planet's well-being are intertwined.
Precisely. Which leads us nicely into our next source, looking at a specific model for youth action, youth-led social enterprises. This comes from an article by Earth 5R.
Okay, social enterprises. How does the article define that?
It defines social entrepreneurship as basically business ventures where the main priority is creating social value and driving development rather than just maximizing profit.
So mission-driven businesses.
Exactly. The goal is to alleviate some kind of systemic social or cultural problem, and environmental sustainability and renewable energy are highlighted as key areas where social entrepreneurs are active.
How does it differentiate them from, say, traditional entrepreneurs?
It draws clear distinctions, objectives, sustainable business versus sustainable and socially impactful business, motives, often financially driven versus primarily mission-driven, focus, individual consumers versus broader social groups or needs, link to social issues, indirect versus direct and central, approach to competition, often competitive versus more collaborative, and crucially, how success is measured, profits versus social impact.
That's a helpful comparison.
Yeah.
And how does it differ from just corporate social responsibility, CSR?
Good question. CSR is more about established businesses adopting positive social policies alongside their main business. Social entrepreneurship, on the other hand, is the business model. The social change element is core to its purpose and operations, not an add-on.
Got it. Does the article mention different ways of thinking about social entrepreneurship?
It does briefly touch on a few academic approaches. The innovative school of thought, seeing them as change makers. The social enterprise school of thought, focusing on earning revenue for social service. The EAMS approach, looking at economic, social, and governance dimensions. And the UK approach, emphasizing reinvestment of surplus for social goals. It also notes critically that funding and good management are essential for these enterprises to be sustainable long-term.
Okay. Does it give a concrete example of a youth-led one?
Yes, a really compelling one, Earth 5R. It's described as a global environmental tech startup based in Mumbai. They've even received UNESCO recognition and won a Google Play Store Best Apps Award in 2023.
Wow, impressive. What do they actually do?
Their mission is shaping a sustainable future, and they use mobile phones as a key tool powered by a global network.
Using tech for good. How?
Their app uses AI and big data to connect people to environmental actions they can take. It helps transform urban spaces, making them greener, and it amplifies positive sustainability stories. They also partner with big global brands on their ESG strategies, environmental, social governance, helping companies reward sustainable actions and cut their carbon footprints.
So they're bridging citizen action and corporate responsibility through tech.
Seems like it. The article concludes by stressing that social entrepreneurs blend passion for a cause with solid business skills to tackle community problems.
And what's the broader significance highlighted?
It makes a strong case for why social entrepreneurship matters. It creates opportunities, it's reshaping CSR, it's gaining government attention, inspiring change, providing jobs, promoting equality, raising social awareness, fostering inclusive growth and innovation, making better use of resources, and ultimately contributing to better living standards. It's presented as a really powerful model for young people to drive change.
A very positive and proactive model. Okay, so we've seen the action, the impacts, the models. Finally, let's look at support. How is youth climate action actually being funded and enabled? We've got info from a Restless Development Youth Fund application in India and an IUCN blog post.
Right. The Restless Development Youth Fund, this specific one is in Karnataka, India, has a clear focus: climate action and active citizenship.
Okay.
Its main goal is to amplify the work young people are already doing on climate change and social action. They want to build a coalition and, critically, provide funding. It specifically aims to tackle that issue of young people being marginalized in decision-making.
So what kind of support do they offer?
It's tailored. Capacity building workshops, mentorship from experienced people, and importantly, funding. Small, flexible grants up to 500,000 Indian rupees, which is about maybe 6,000 US, give or take.
That could make a real difference for a grassroots project. Who are they targeting?
Youth who are part of organizations that are either youth-led or demonstrably youth-supported. And these organizations need to have FCRA registration, that's the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act in India, governing foreign funding.
Okay, specific criteria. What kind of projects do they prioritize?
Ones that strengthen collective action, working together, and projects with a clear focus on both climate action and wider social action.
And what about their approach, their principles?
They list several key ones. Prioritizing youth leadership is central. Training and resourcing young leaders effectively. Prioritizing safety and well-being. Being open, dynamic, accountable. Intentionally trying to shift power towards youth. And being flexible, innovative, and creative.
Sounds like a really youth-centered approach.
It does. They encourage applications that engage diverse young people and show collaboration between different groups. There are practical requirements too, of course, commitment to implementing the project, internet access, being responsive, attending induction, reporting, that kind of thing. The deadline mentioned is March 6th, 2025.
Good practical details. Now, what about the IUCN blog post? What perspective does that bring?
The IUCN post really zooms out again to the bigger picture. It hammers home the escalating threat of climate change and, again, its disproportionate impact on young people. It strongly emphasizes that youth are essential stakeholders and agents of change for sustainability. You can't achieve it without them.
Does it offer any data to back that up?
Yeah, it cites data from the Stockholm Environment Institute showing just how much more likely children born in, say, 2020 are to experience extreme climate impacts compared to those born in 1960. It makes the generational inequality very stark.
Wow, that really brings it home.
So the post stresses how critical it is to include youth voices in environmental decisions at all levels and to actively support their initiatives. It points to successful movements we've already touched on Fridays for Future, Global Youth Biodiversity Network, but also others like Save the Beach in the Maldives, the Arab Youth Council for Climate Change.
So it's a global phenomenon. What's the call to action from IUCN?
A strong call for decision makers, governments, institutions to make structural changes, to create genuinely inclusive platforms for youth participation, not just token gestures.
Right.
And it echoes the need for concrete support. Money, yes, but also mentorship and access to networks. These are vital to unlock youth potential.
And why are youth voices so important in this context, according to IUCN?
They bring unique perspectives, fresh ideas, innovative solutions, and critically, they bring a long-term perspective because it's their future on the line. They're also seen as key in holding governments accountable for their commitments and driving change from the ground up, often using technology and community engagement very effectively.
So both sources, in different ways, really highlight the absolute necessity of actively supporting and properly resourcing these youth-led efforts.
Exactly. It's about unlocking their transformative potential for everyone's benefit.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, I mean, the picture is incredibly clear, isn't it? Young people aren't just passively inheriting environmental problems.
Not at all. They're actively on the front lines, driving solutions with, well, remarkable energy and creativity. We've seen such a diverse range of initiatives just in this discussion.
From that really hands-on local restoration work,
Like the mangroves and the seed banks.
right up to influencing global movements and creating these innovative social enterprises.
Yeah, and it's so important, I think, to grasp how interconnected environmental action is with positive youth development itself.
Totally. Getting involved doesn't just help the planet. It empowers young people, builds crucial skills, drives positive social change in their communities. It's a win-win.
Absolutely. So maybe our final thought for you, the listener, is this. That passion, that innovative spirit, that sheer commitment you see from young people, it's a genuinely powerful force for creating a sustainable future.
And actively supporting their efforts, whether it's through funding, mentorship, amplification, or just making space for their voices, it's absolutely crucial, not just for them, but for the long-term well-being of, well, all of us and the planet.
So maybe think about how you could potentially support or even get involved with youth-led environmental initiatives right there in your own community.
Definitely something to consider. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.